Welcome, my cellar dwellers, to the Matthew Street channel. I am your host, Matthew Street. I really appreciate you being here, and we are live again in my cavern. How you all doing, folks? Thanks for being here. Hey, folks, who remembers a time when your neighbors were more than nuisances, or your neighbors were not just neighbors? A time when your neighbors were not only friends, but in many instances, your neighbors were like family to you. You were that close. Who remembers those times? Well, unless you're old like me, you probably don't remember times like that. Yeah, there may be rare occurrences in the last couple of decades, and certainly in 2021, 2022, where you could say, yeah, I've seen occurrences like that where neighbors are that tight. But I doubt it. I don't think you see too much of that nowadays. But let me tell you, I remember those times vividly. I do. Especially when I was a little kid during the 1960s. I do remember those times for sure. Now, during most of the 60s, I lived in a suburb of Boston, Mass. and Providence, Rhode Island. I was somewhere between Boston and Providence. Suburb, sleepy community, not too small. Houses were fairly close together. But behind my house, which was built in the early part of the 60s, there was a little patch of woods behind my house and our land, and going across to the next street where some other houses were. And many years later, that woods got developed, but during the 60s and most of the 70s, it was undeveloped, and there was a place for us to go into some wooded area and play and have fun. And those were great times. But through those woods, there was a little path that went through the woods to the houses on the street behind us, and there was an older house right behind us, many decades older than ours. As I said, ours was built in the early 60s. This went much further back. There was a family that lived there, a mom and a dad with an older son and an older daughter and a younger son. And over the years, when we first got there in the early part of the 60s, our family and this family became very, very close friends. To the point that by the 1980s, or 70s even, I just remember we were like family. They were like family to us. I was just a little kid in the 60s when we met them, but the mom and dad were like an aunt and an uncle to me, and the older kids, I just idolized them. They were, the daughter was born 1952. Her name was Patty. And the son, his name was Michael. He was born like 1955. So they were like 8, 9 years older than me. So I looked up to them. I'm sure they babysat for us over the years and, all that stuff. I just looked so up to these two kids. They seemed so grown up to me, And especially Patty. Like I said, she was born 1952, so coming into the 60s, she was at that 12, 13, 14-year-old range, in 64, 65, 66, when I was just a little kid. And she was your typical 1960s teenage girl, American teenage girl. She just loved music. She loved the Beatles. I remember going into their house and getting to go up to their bedrooms, and the son always had, the typical boy stuff, the G.I. Joes and his little, toy guitar and his sports stuff and all that. And Patty, you'd go in her room and there'd be the stuffed animals and the music posters and pictures on her wall. I remember a picture of the Beatles, and I remember there were other artists who I couldn't identify at the time, but it was your typical 60s family with typical 60s kids. And boy, she was just a great, great girl from my memories of her. She was a volunteer candy striper, if you remember those, at the local hospital. She was a Girl Scout. She participated in activities at her high school where she was a sophomore in 1968, 69. And the reason I mention that 68, 69 period is because it was in March of 1969 where we lost Patty at the age of 16. It was the first time in my young life, I was 7 going on 8 years old, that I was aware of someone passing away. that I lost somebody that was part of my young life at that time. And I remember it being very traumatic and very upsetting. It definitely had an impact on me. It was, she had an acute illness. You know, being 7 going on 8, I don't remember much of the details other than what my parents told me after, but it was some type of an acute blood illness, or maybe something like a leukemia, something like that. But she wasn't sick very long, and I just remember, you know, my parents would go to the hospital to visit her when she was in the hospital, and I just have this memory of my dad going to see her one evening after we ate supper. My mom stayed home with myself and my 2 little brothers. And when he got home, I remember him walking in our front door and he was sobbing. He was crying. And I had never seen that before with my dad. And I still have that vision of him walking in our front door, getting ready to come up the stairs with tears running down his cheeks. And I just had a very, it's a memory I'll never forget. But moving forward a little bit, it was a sad loss, as I said, one of the first losses in my young life. And a couple of years later, her mom gave my mom a plastic bag. She might have given my mom other things, but I just remember giving my mom a plastic bag filled with Patti's 45 RPM records. Now, there were no more sleeves on these records. As you remember, kids in the 60s used to, who knows what they did with the picture sleeves or the regular plain sleeves. They discarded them. They got lost in the shuffle. Maybe she had them hanging on her wall. I don't know. But they used to keep them in those little record 45 cases where you take off the top, it would screw on, and there'd be a spindle in the middle, and you would drop the 45s down on the spindle. And that's how they stored their 45s, those kids in the 60s. They just stacked them on top of one another. So when I received them from my mom, she eventually gave them to me, knowing I liked music and the Beatles at the time. The sleeves were long gone. But I preserved the 45s. I kept them in that bag for many, many years, and I never really played them. I would just keep them in a box. I just felt very, it felt that it was an important thing for me to preserve these 45s, because they were Patti's 45s, and it was something symbolic for me that I felt I needed to hang on to them, not separate them into other collections, not give them away, not throw them away, just hang on to them in a bag. And I'm like that. I'm a pack rat anyway. I save things, memories and stuff like that. So I saved her 45s in that little plastic bag for decades and decades. And every once in a while, I would take them out and flip through them and think of Patti, you know, as I grew into my teenage adult years, 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, how much she must have enjoyed this music and how much it meant to her. And it was, to me, it was like a time capsule of a 60s teenager who died way too young in 1969, before the end of the decade. And that little time capsule just meant so much to me that I felt I needed to keep them safe all these 50 plus years. And many of them are still in great shape. I took her Beatle ones and I united them with picture sleeves that I had collected over the years through my Beatles collecting. You know, I would get a picture sleeve here and there of a certain song, and then eventually I would unite, I would take Patti's loose 45, which would normally be in pretty good shape, and I would unite it with a picture sleeve, which I'm going to show you some of Patti's Beatle 45s that I saved and have united with picture sleeves. I think you'll enjoy that. But I also thought I'd show you some of this time capsule by showing some of Patti's other 45s, things she had. A typical 16-year-old teenager from the 60s who, like I said, died way too young, at 16 going on 17, way too soon. And so I want to just dedicate this video to Patti. Nobody I know of in her family is going to really see this. Her mom passed away in 2007. Her dad passed away, sadly, in the late 80s. Her brother is still alive, but I haven't had contact with him in decades. So I'm sure he'll never see this. And I did on the header card, if you notice, I blocked out her last name. I just felt, in the interest of privacy, I didn't put her last name. But you can see her picture in the header of this video, death announcement, the obituary that she passed at age 16. And it's been many, many decades, but I just feel I need to do this as a tribute to Patty to show some of her vintage 45s to you folks. So I will say one thing, she had a couple that were kind of, you could tell when she must have been younger, because she had one, the Woody Woodpecker song by the Sandpipers. I thought that was cute. Another one I thought was cute, and I remember liking as a child when I was very young. I think I had my own 45 of this, one of the first 45s Matt Street ever owned. But Patty had Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead by the Fifth Estate. Love that song, and it just makes me smile to think of it that Patty also had a copy of that. This was really big. Napoleon the 14th. They're coming to take me away. Aha, aha. Who remembers that? To the Funny Farm. So I thought that was a cute one she had in her collection. She really liked Herman's Hermits. I won't show you them all, but I have 3 Herman's Hermits on MGM that she had. This one happens to be Dandy, though. But she did have, okay, I'll read them. Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter. And she had, I think the A-side is East West, or What Is Wrong, What Is Right. That's kind of an obscure Herman's Hermits. She had a couple of Peter and Gordons. She had True Love Ways on Capitol. She had Lady Godiva, backed with Morning's Calling. And I have 2 monkeys from her. She had A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, great song. And Patty also had I'm Not Your Stepping Stone with I'm a Believer. And on the flip of A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You is The Girl I Knew Somewhere, for those wanting to know. Now, some of her other ones I'll go through quickly. She loved The Association. She had a couple by them, and one I can show you, she had Never My Love. And I know she has Cherish, too, but I don't know if I took that one out. The Turtles, Happy Together, classic from the 60s, was in her collection. Monday, Monday by the Mamas and the Papas. Wow, you know, big typical 60s teenager would have that one. Yeah, here's Windy by The Association. Did I show that one all right? Did I have it? Never My Love, okay. And Windy. Did I get that right? Yeah, The Association, yeah. On the Kama Sutra label, she had You Didn't Have to Be So Nice by the Lovin' Spoonful. She only had one Creedence on Fantasy, Who'll Stop the Rain, Creedence Clearwater Revival, backed with Travelin' Band. I'd Wait a Million Years, The Grassroots. This was a unique one. The Peppermint Rainbow, Will You Be Staying After Sunday on Decca, backed with And I'll Be There. I don't even know which one's the A-side. Oh, she had Snoopy versus the Red Baron by the Royal Guardsmen. Remember that one? Oh, wow. Georgie Girl by the Seekers. Over and Over by the Dave Clark 5. I believe #1 for them. Scott McKenzie, San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair. Just such a time capsule to see Patty's old 45s from before she passed. Lou Christie's Lightning Strikes. Woman, Woman by the Union Gap. The Rain, the Park, and Other Things by the Cowsills. Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Looking for the Stars, backed with You Don't Have to Paint Me a Picture, and I'm not sure which side's the A-side. Such wonderful memories. And here's Cherish by the Association on Valiant Records. Show you some of Patty's Beatles 45 she had. This one I don't have a picture sleeve for yet, but she had Lady Madonna, backed with the Inner Light. She had We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper, which like I said, united with my picture sleeves. She had Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields. She had the Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby single. She had Nowhere Man, backed with What Goes On. Again, my picture sleeves with Patty's 45s. All You Need Is Love and Baby You're a Rich Man. Yesterday and Act Naturally. Did I show you that picture sleeve? I didn't. And last but not least, she had Help with I'm Down. One of my favorites. So folks, I hope you enjoyed this. Memory of Patty. May she rest in peace. Love you all. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this little tribute to a 60s teenager. Love you all. Bye-bye.